Well, hello everyone and welcome to the March webinar. I'm Carrie Smith and my webcam is not working today, so apologies, but we're so excited to have Rex Miller with us today and also Kate North with us. All right, Kate, I'm going to pass it to you, and if you could kick things off, and then we'll be able to listen in on what Rex gets to share today.
I'd be happy to. Hello, everyone. Happy March and almost St. Patty's Day. This is an exciting one for us, a webinar. You know, Rex has been with us from the very, very beginning, and we always welcome his good, deep thinking. He's constantly really incubating new ideas in areas that are just, beginning to be cultivated. He helps us shed light on those things that we should be focused on. So we're honored and delighted to have him with us. He's been, just a beloved of we for many, many years. So thank you, Rex.
Thank you, Kate. I am Carrie Smith. I'm one of the co-leads for the webinars today, and I'm Director of Global Consulting at JLL. And I'm so sorry I can't physically see you. My webcam is having challenges. But most importantly, I'm here to introduce Rex Miller, who I'm so excited to have with us today. He is a renowned keynote speaker and consultant with a unique perspective and a skill set within this field of transformational change. And with 44 years of experience in our industry, Rex has earned a reputation as an orchestrator of change, and he has won a variety of awards in our industry. I'll quickly just give you some background on Rex. He is the owner of MindShift, a research and organizational consultancy firm, and founded a software company called Genius Spark, and the River Rose Leadership Ranch in Glen Rose, Texas. And his innovation approach, known as MindShift process, is designed to break through constraints and drive progress for organizations and industries. Well, Rex, I am so thrilled to have you here today and learn more about redesigning work around the human brain and body, which is something I don't think about very often. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you because I'm very excited to hear what you have to share today. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Rex.
There's a lot of great research that has been taking place over the last 20 years on performance. And I think if there's a common thread through everything I do, it's about human performance and team performance. What you're seeing here is an image of the autonomic nervous system. There's two sides to it, and I'll go into what those are, but it's really easy to see that the red side, the sympathetic side, is the on switch, and it's also the fight or flight switch. The right side is the parasympathetic or the rest switch. And the challenge we have, which we'll talk about, is that we don't have a good balance between those two, and there's some new ways we can do that in the workplace. As we look at it, the big idea that I want to talk about is to shift our thinking to designing for what I would call cognitive athletes. And I wrote about this in the book, The Healthy Workplace Nudge, but really we're performing and we're only as good as our brain and our bodies allow us to be. When you look at a performance venue, you can see here in this sports venue that there's several different areas that people are engaging in. And when you go to a professional sports or even a collegiate sports training facility, it's very intentional, very purposeful. There's social areas, there's inspirational areas, there's relax, there's the trainers, and there's all the things that after you perform to help you be at your best. So let's talk about cognitive athletes, the brain-body connection, and I'm going to focus on the brain and heart connection here. And then the second idea we'll talk about is the whole idea of recovery, arriving restored to work, leaving renewed. The third idea in the presentation will be about meetings, designing for effectiveness, not efficiency. The fourth idea is understanding the day in the life of our employees. And as Dave Radcliffe, who has now retired from Google, he was the head of Google's real estate and construction, He said their primary job is to reduce the friction of work. And there's a brain and energy purpose behind that. And then the last idea is about deep work. We need it, we crave it, but we seldom get it. Now, when you're thinking about performance venues, I want you to think about the brain work we do, the cognitive brain work in terms of the conditioning for what we do, the practice, the preparation, the actual performance, getting into those peak performance states called flow. Then after the performance, there's a processing side where you go back and learn from what you went through. There's the recovery, and then there's training and learning. Those are the elements when we think of facilities that we have to design for. So who is Rex Miller? Carrie gave a great review. I'd like that written down so I could give it to my wife. I will briefly just show these are the different elements that Carrie talked about. I will add the Resilience Lab is a podcast that talks about all of the levels of building our best selves. And we've got some incredible interviews, like with Dr. Roizen, the Chief Wellness Officer at the Cleveland Clinic, Kristen Holmes-Wynn, the VP of Performance Optimization at Whoop, and several others. I will also add that I am regularly posting my newest thoughts research on LinkedIn. So if you're not following me on LinkedIn, that's a great way to keep up. I've been a member of IFMA since 1981 when I worked at Southwestern Bell, and it was called Facility Management Institute. And one thing you may not know that adds to the whole performance focus is I've been a USPTA tennis professional since 1979. Questions during this presentation that I would like you to think about. First of all, let's think about what kind of work energizes you. Jot down a couple of those things that you do, because when it energizes you, it's tapping in to the strongest, most natural elements of your brain, and it's releasing positive hormones like dopamine, endorphin, and serotonin. Now, think of the work that drains you. Again, what's happening is what you naturally do best and enjoy most, which is how your brain is wired. It's being constrained. That constraint creates cortisol, which is stress. The third area is, where do you do your best work? For me right now, it's in my little happy place, this little cabin on our ranch, which is right by the river. And this is where I go to get that deep work feeling and sense of productivity. And then finally, I want you to think about this, because sleep is going to be a thread throughout this. When you have a rough night of sleep, how does it affect your day? Just think about that, because that ties directly into coming to work restored, being able to perform at our best, and then having a means throughout the day at work to get renewed so we go home and we can prepare ourselves for a great evening of social connection, winding down and getting a great night's sleep. Unfortunately, the routines that most Americans have, 70% of Americans come to work sleep deprived, and 50% of them are deprived to the point where we are considered legally drunk. If you're getting less than 6 hours of restorative sleep a night, you're considered to be legally drunk. Let's look at the first idea underneath all of this. We're designing for cognitive athletes. And so when we look at the brain and the heart connection, that's called neurocardiology. And this is recent research. Well, when I say recent, it's the last 20 years, but this isn't released incredible new findings about how to be at our best, peak performance. And a lot of that has been through the sports venue. The heart sends signals 100 times stronger to the brain than the brain sends to the signal. So when you're amped up, for example, if you've heard you've got a friend in the emergency room and you go racing to the hospital and your heart is racing and that cortisol is going and that adrenaline is flowing through the bodies and your eyes are dilated and you walk in, you're not necessarily thinking rationally because the heart has taken over. You're in that survival mode. And there's a saying in preschool and in schools that teach social emotional literacy, when kids come to school and they're amped up, they didn't get a good night's sleep, or for whatever reason, you cannot logic your way out of an amygdala hijack. That is when the amygdala goes off and your heart is racing. And those happen in meetings all the time with us. When we hit a sensitive topic, there's somebody there we're not comfortable with, there's conflict, we come in tired, we're amped up on caffeine. All of those things are affecting how the heart is moving. And the faster that the heart moves, it shuts off the cognitive, the prefrontal cortex at some certain point. And then you're no longer logically processing and taking information in a rational way. You're reacting. This is our job, is to reduce all that cognitive load and reduce the heart so that it's beating at a point that our prefrontal cortexes can function. The second thing is the brain is a calorie hog. 25% of the calories we consume is just in relational face-to-face interaction. That's a lot, but it doubles when we're in a virtual environment. So if you've been in back-to-back virtual meetings and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon you feel wiped out, this is why, and I'll show you some evidence for that. Conserving energy is the brain's #1 priority. It conserves, and that's the whole area of behavioral economics and nudges, where we are in a default mode 80% of our time, because most decisions we have to make are not life or death or not high interest. So the brain focuses on conserving that. So if we use up that precious energy reserve we have, then we don't function properly when we have to make a critical decision. Now, if you have a dog, what does your dog do most of the time? If you're like the dogs that we had or my son's dogs, they sleep most of the time. And that's how we were designed, is to be in rest mode most of the time. And then when we were running away from the Tyrannosaurus Rex or we were hunting, we were in these episodic modes of peak performance. However, in today's society, that on switch is on most of the time. Now, I don't know what it is about dogs and UPS drivers or Amazon drivers, but for some reason they can sense 100 yards away that they're driving up and they jump to action. And that's what we were designed to do. And that's our heart rate moving up. And the factor on how well we can do that is called heart rate variability. A lot of us, when we have to respond, it takes us a while to get our engines going. And that's what we want to change. So good design reduces cognitive load by providing intuitive, engaging solutions. But remember, again, we're trying to reduce the friction of work. Every friction point along an employee's day, whether it's the technology, the entry point, interactions, all those friction points are stress producing. Stress produces cortisol, and cortisol in the body is cumulative. And then when we go home at night, we oftentimes address that cumulative stress or cortisol with unhealthy coping behaviors, and then that interrupts sleep. Idea number 2, quality sleep is the #1 means of recovery and peak performance. We need to design to allow that to take place. Now, one of the discoveries has been that sleep is the new fountain of youth for athletes. We've got several aging athletes that get sleep, as you know, they're sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night and they're extending their careers. So let's look at changing mindsets. In sports, it used to be there ain't no gain if there ain't no pain. When I grew up in sports, that was it. We would run and do drills and go to exhaustion. And then we would do that day after day and then expect to compete at our best when we were in tournaments. And what's happened is we didn't realize that we all start with a tank of gas. Now, here's my tank of gas for today. I use a Whoop strap. There's others. There's the Oura Ring and the Garmin. And this tells me, let's say that I've got 300 miles of distance that I can go for in this tank of gas. What it's telling me is that I've got 250 miles before I start depleting my energy reserves for the day. Now, most of us are coming to work with less than half a tank and we don't realize it. And our bodies sub-optimize, so we don't know what normal or what full recovery feels like. I went through that when I started discovering this in 2015 and 2016. And what happens when you deplete your gas tank and you're running on fumes for extended period of time, like athletes have done, it's called overtraining syndrome or adrenal fatigue. Now, this chart shows you my strain levels in the blue and my recovery levels in the yellow and green. This is an example of overextending beyond what my gas tank has. And so I'm pulling from other sources in the body. And over brief periods of time, you can do this. But when it was 2015 for me, I was doing this to the point where I was burning out and didn't even realize it. Sleep is the new fountain of youth. We've seen athletes like Tom Brady, Roger Federer, Justin Verlander, and others extend their careers because recovery is now the new means, the new tool for peak performance. So think about recovery periods throughout the day instead of going back to back to back to back. And then we design our days like it's a sprint when it should be more like a marathon, and having these periods of performance recovery. And we don't design days for that. We don't design facilities to accommodate that. Now, here's the challenging corollary in the workplace is the all-nighter mentality. I remember growing up young in the career side, and it was a badge of honor to say, hey, you know, I got 4 hours of sleep last night. Look at me. And what that produces is this this lower mediocre performance level and burnout. I had a client who bought a new Cadillac. He was bragging to me that he only needed 5 hours of sleep a night. And I was very adamant in saying, you're nuts. That's not how it works. And he said, I use Lunesta. I can get 5 hours. And I told him that Lunesta and any sleep drug doesn't give you sleep. It just makes you unconscious. But then the kicker was, the reason he bought this Cadillac is it has an eye tracker that if you begin to fall asleep, it'll shake and wake you up. We got to change the mentality about what peak performance is all about. Under quality of sleep, everyone has a bad night of sleep. So think back when you've had a bad night of sleep. How many of you have wanted to just slip away for 20 minutes to get a little power nap? Power naps are magical. They give you an extra 90-minute boost. And facilities need to provide private areas for power naps that are stigma-free. But there's no real place to go and get a little boost for the day. Wearable technologies are now primarily at a personal level. Teams are looking at them as aggregating collective knowledge. I think there's going to be a convergence where our personal wearables will be able to feed into an aggregate database in the company, and we can monitor our performance levels anonymized, but we can see overall trends. Now, I use Whoop and I use Oura Ring for my wearable technology. And here's an example of what it could look like in a facility. Four Winds Interactive in Denver combines integrated data into displays. One of the things they provide is if you go into the workout room, they're integrated with Fitbit, and my Fitbit data will load up automatically. I may be part of a team. It'll show me where I rank in my team as to how much workout I've done or how I've performed, and give me a comparison. But imagine this. Imagine a display dashboard that shows the biometric elements of the aggregate of the company, your heart rate variability, your strain level, and your recovery. And it's giving you a daily report card, just like energy use report cards, on how much energy your company has and periods of time where it drains or it's at peak times or certain days of the week. This will give us incredible information on how to tune our daily schedule and our environments to be able to optimize performance and optimize health. Idea number 3, rethinking meetings to reduce stress and fatigue. It's still going on. It's back to back to back. Here is Microsoft's research using brain scans. What happens if you take no breaks? And so these are beta waves. And when you take no breaks, the stress level continues to build and build and build. On the bottom is when you get to take breaks. And you can see that the beta waves stay relatively stable throughout all 4. I have actually measured this with my Whoop in terms of how much additional calories I'm burning as I go back-to-back meetings. And so for the same meeting in the same coaching session, I'm burning 20, 30, 40, and double the amount of calories as the day goes on without breaks. We need to realize, again, energy is everything we got, and energy is what the brain uses to function well. And as we go back to back, we're becoming less effective unless we design for that. Meetings are the #1 source of workplace stress and fatigue. Work is the #1 source of stress and burnout for people in general. So this is an area that we have to attack, and we have to attack it in several ways. We also have to realize that virtual meetings are taking twice the amount of energy to participate in than live meetings. And nobody has done anything about setting boundaries or creating better environments or improving cameras, improving audio, all of those things that make it harder to function. All the stressors of technology that doesn't function smoothly, all of that's creating cortisol. All that's consuming energy. We've got a lot of opportunity to smooth these areas out. This is an example from my Oura Ring of a 2-hour and 20-minute virtual session, and it calculated that I burned 1,800 calories in that 2 hours 20. That's crazy, right? And it was the equivalent of a 20-mile walk. I have done day after day after day where I've had the equivalent of 36 to 45 miles of calorie and strain on my body doing these virtual presentations. In fact, when we're done today, I'll look at my Whoop and see how many calories I burn. Now, it would be nice to think, okay, this is going to make me skinnier and all of that, but the problem is it's stress-related calories. That's not helpful for you in your body. So action steps for improving meeting experiences. Let's first look at every conference room and meeting should have a default setting for time in the software. You can't book it for more than 45 minutes, period. You just can't. Your body and your mind can't sustain more than 45 minutes to an hour and stay focused. On the front end of every meeting, we should provide everybody 5 minutes to get your thoughts together, to make your notes, to get prepped. Most people run into the meeting not having prepped at all, and then it's kind of a mess to begin with. Your thoughts are still in the last meeting. There's a 10 to 15 minute residual in your brain from a previous meeting going into another meeting. So we need time to cleanse the palate. We also need social interaction time. The uncertainty, uh, the the social conditions are oftentimes creating cortisol, and that social connection time changes the dynamic in your body from cortisol to serotonin. That's the connection or the psychological safety hormone. Consider transition spaces like green rooms and quiet rooms. Right outside, just like you do when a keynote comes in, there's a place to go in, get your headset, go through your presentation, practice, get ready, and then you go back and you can it's stressful and it takes a lot of calories. So there's water in the room and there's some snacks, protein snacks and nuts and things like that. We need to think about these spaces are that main performance venue that we have, and we need spaces that transition us in and out. Create a 15-minute buffer between meetings. That's the Microsoft lesson. Idea number 4, lessons from the 4 seasons. And this is specifically about guest journey. Guest journey is looking at the day in the life of a guest coming to a 4 seasons, and they're trained in emotional intelligence, looking at nonverbal cues when guests come in, and they know what your profile is coming in. So they've already preset up to ask you about what would you prefer, and they already know a lot of this information. And it's really fun to watch it in motion. It's hospitality at some of its highest levels. Well, GoDaddy put these lessons to work. Now, the reason this is important, creating that high touch experience for employees coming in and understanding what the day in the life is. For example, the commute coming in, that lobby experience, those first 30 minutes in the office are the critical tone setting times that will determine whether someone's going to have a good day or a stressful reactive day. Work is the 5th leading cause of death. This is Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer's work in Dying for a Paycheck. Heart attacks go up 20% on Mondays coming in. So we know that the commute is the number 2 source of stress. Meetings number 1, commute number 2. So if we're looking at re-engaging employees back into the workplace or attracting them, we need to address these 2 major challenges. Now, GoDaddy hired 4-season trainers to take them through a journey map aimed at reducing cortisol and increasing dopamine in the day and the life of their employees. They did it in a few ways. One was through the environment. This is their global tech center. The previous global tech center, you went into this low ceiling, industrial looking building. You can imagine programmers going in with Bob, the security guy who grunts and you just put in your security badge. They changed it to having light experience, humans who actually greet you friendly. I've been there several times, and after a day or two, they remember your names. They're trained to do that. And if you go to the right-hand side of this photo, right behind the logo, it goes right into the cafeteria. So you're coming in, you're feeling good, sunlight, human, that cortisol is reducing to serotonin. Then you go into a social environment, and then you get ready for the day. It's well designed. Open lobby, I talked about that, friendly greeting, social space adjacent to coffee and food. Hospitality training, they not only design the environment to be hospitable coming in, they train their staff in the same disciplines and skills of 4 Seasons employees. This is an example of the training. I worked with their 4 Seasons person. I provided a part of it that helped people understand how they best play their role, playing to their strengths. And then the 4 Seasons people were training them on emotional intelligence, how to read people, and then how to engage with them and anticipate need. That's all what hospitality is. If you go to some of the best hospitality restaurants, like in Chicago, the one-off hospitality restaurants like Publicans or PQM, they are trained to look and create a unique one-off experience. That's what hospitality is all about, a personalized experience based on your desires or your needs. the novelty of hospitality furniture. Without hospitality, the experience wears off. So unless people are trained, and your facility support staff, that's your food services and your facility services people, unless they're trained, empowered, given some budget money to make someone's day wonderful, then the furniture doesn't add much to the overall ambiance. It's just furniture and it'll wear off. It's the experience that you feel at a Ritz or a 11 Madison Avenue or a Four Seasons. It's the interaction that's valuable. It's not the furniture. Okay, number 5, understanding ultradian rhythms, deep work and flow. Ultradian rhythms are similar to our sleep cycles at night. It's just our wake. We go through an energy cycle of low energy and it builds and we have peak energy and then it declines and we need to recover and we go through these cycles. But we obliterate the cycles. We just plow through and just do work all day long. Ultradian rhythms are important to understand. Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, is a great one. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book, Flow, is another good one to look at as well. And here's a performance curve that you're seeing. And we know that most employees are disengaged, 70% are disengaged. My theory is a lot of it is because of fatigue and low, they've sub-optimized to just getting through the day. But there's this peak area of engagement where you get into this unconscious engagement where you're experiencing endorphins. They call it the runner's high. I do this almost every day. I've got a planned period of time. I set aside 2 hours. It usually is a 90-minute cycle. It takes you 20 minutes to get into a flow state. And then you need to stay in that state for a good 45 minutes in order to get the full benefit. But the challenge of maintaining focus, that's the big problem. Distraction is the number 1 challenge that we face in the workplace. And it comes, we experience about 150 times a day. Imagine it takes 20 minutes to get into a focused work state, and yet we're being interrupted 150 times a day. The average adult will find experiences 3 minutes of focus time. In fact, the adult attention span is 180 seconds. For a college student, it's half of that right now. And a lot of this is because of the phone, the social media, and just our inability to be comfortable with nothing going on or being in a contemplative or reflective mode. So what is an ultradian rhythm? I described that already. It's the energy cycle of up and down and that recovery. The importance of deep work and flow states. When you're in a deep work state and your brain is working at its best, it's building what they call, it's myelinating the neurons, the myelin sheaths. They're getting thicker, which means your brain functioning is getting stronger and better when you get into a flow state. When you don't, it short circuits that completely. It releases endorphins, and those endorphins keep you in that state of flow. We also need to understand individual preferences for engaged work. We have 4 zones that we can think about when designing. There are people who enjoy relating, and in most individuals, they have 1 dominant zone, maybe 2 dominant zones. So those who are in the red, relating, and the motivating zone, those people do their best work thinking aloud, bouncing things off, working with groups, having high engagement levels of social engagement levels. If you're in the green and orange, that thinking and acting, you just want to be left alone and think and do. Now, there's different combinations of these as well, but this gives you a beginning framework for thinking about zones that people can work in and letting them. We use the Clifton Strengths Assessment. You can use other assessments to help determine what zones people are at their best in and what kind of work they do best. Creating areas of flow to accommodate. So have no tech zones for individuals. No technology, not even your phone is allowed. No tech zones for group, so they can connect and talk. Calendar systems that protect deep work time so that when you go in, you know I've got a guaranteed 90 minutes where I can do deep work. And systems that create boundaries to protect employees from contact after they've clocked in 45 hours of work. And 45 hours, I just picked a number, but whatever that is, we need ways to protect people from intrusions so that they can recover. All right, so let's recap the key points. I'm going to bring this up again about sleep and the importance of sleep. We would never say, hey, this person's a great worker. They're drunk all the time, but that's because they're not getting enough sleep. We would not celebrate that, yet we celebrate people who sacrifice sleep to get work done. The body is regulated by the autonomic nervous system. It's stronger, the signals are stronger to the brain, and so we need to understand this new element of designing for the body. There's two parts of it. The sympathetic nervous system is the on switch. The parasympathetic system is the rest mode. These are out of balance, and our job is to help reduce friction at work, create ways to put this more in balance so we can truly turn off and get into that rest and recovery mode. The number one, being always on, is the number one cause of disengagement, fatigue, and burnout. So we have to prioritize sleep and recovery using technology, policy, leadership modeling, because I've worked with some companies that tried to put this in, but the leaders were still working 60 hours and on weekends, and nobody was following them until we called them on it. And then they put in systems and they used technology by shutting off emails. And this was a small enough company, you know, it's 250 people. They could do that on weekends. We have to prioritize private places to power nap without stigma. Number two, redesigning meetings for effectiveness, providing time to prepare, time to recover in between. Reducing cognitive load and increasing engagement by training and empowering facility staff in the skills of hospitality. Encourage deep work and accommodate different styles of work to increase focus and productivity. The future of work is designing to optimize the brain and the body, not space, not footprint. And there's a couple things we need to put into place for this. We're designing performance environments, not workspaces. Design must support the rhythms of performance. Remember, those rhythms are conditioning, practice, preparation, performance, flow, processing, recovery, and learning. Since the pandemic, we must now also rethink moving away from centralized mindset and imagine an ecosystem of distributed performance venues. William Gibson is one of my favorite futurist and science fiction writers. One of the things I've learned and we utilize in our process of change management is that somebody is already doing some of this out there. And by going and visiting these outliers and then connecting the dots on what they're doing commonly, that gives us a roadmap to the future. He said the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So thank you for the time, and we'll open it up for questions.
Rex, thank you so much for this fascinating presentation today. I personally had never thought about the comparison of going to the office and work to being an athlete and having to balance out those rhythms. I thought that was something I will be taking back with me.